snow kept falling in thick, quiet sheets as Alicia stood before the half-open door, her breath forming clouds that drifted upward like tiny ghosts in the cold. She felt the weight of the dare pressing at the back of her mind, the laughter of her colleagues echoing faintly like a memory from another life. The house before her glowed softly, its lights dimmed as if holding secrets in the walls, the kind that whispered rather than shouted. She took a small step forward, her heels crunching, the ice beneath her boots, and in that sound she heard something that did not belong to the night. A faint shift-like movement behind the door. Slow, deliberate watching. Her pulse quickened. The snow had already dusted her hair and shoulders, a delicate shimmer against the dark fabric of her coat. She told herself that this was nothing but a harmless game, that maybe someone had planned a surprise that she would walk in, laugh it off, and drive home to warmth. But a small voice inside whispered that this night was not meant for laughter, and her hand trembled as she reached for the door, her fingertips grazing the wood, cool and real. The hinge creaked softly, a sound too human, too aware. And for one moment she thought she saw a shadow move across the hallway beyond. She pushed the door open and stepped inside. Warmth brushed against her skin, faint but welcome. The kind of warmth that felt lived in, yet untouched for too long. The faint smell of pine and something burnt hung in the air, the remnants of a fire long gone out. She called out a quiet hello. Her voice small and uncertain, but it was swallowed by silence, the sort that listened more than it answered. She moved further in each step, slow, deliberate, her eyes scanning the walls lined with photos, faint outlines she could barely make out in the dim light, until one caught her attention. A photo of herself, smiling in a place she did not recognize. Her heart thudded in her chest. She leaned closer to the picture frame, her own face looking back at her from a scene she could not remember, a park, maybe a cafe somewhere under sunlight instead of snow. And beside her in the picture was a man, his arm around her shoulder, his face turned slightly away. But there was something familiar in the outline, something that pulled at her memory like a thread just beyond reach. She reached out to touch the glass, but her fingers froze halfway as the floor creaked softly behind her slow footsteps that did not belong to her. Alicia turned sharply, but the hallway was empty. The faintest glimmer of light flickered from a door at the far end of the corridor. It swayed slightly open as if waiting. She took a deep breath, trying to steady the tremor in her hands. Her logical mind screamed to leave, to get back in her car and drive away, to pretend this night had never begun. But curiosity was stronger. It always had been the same curiosity that built her career, that made her question and push and never stop, until she found the truth. She took one step toward the door and then another, her shoes making soft imprints in the dust that coated the wooden floor. The door opened into a room filled with boxes, papers, and faint outlines of furniture covered in white sheets. A faint hum came from somewhere, like an old refrigerator still running. Despite the years, she could feel the cold leaking through the window panes, the air heavy with something like memory. She brushed the nearest sheet aside and saw stacks of newspapers, old headlines, about her company, about her own rise to power, about mergers and scandals and awards. Each one marked with notes written in thick black ink, circling words, underlining her name, repeating it again and again like an obsession. Her throat went dry as she picked up one of the clippings. It was dated 2 years ago. The article about her most famous deal, the one that had saved her company from collapse. She remembered the sleepless nights, the choices, the people who had left afterward, the enemies. She had made the deals she had broken, and suddenly she felt the weight of every decision pressing down like the cold outside. She turned at the faint sound of a door shutting somewhere else in the house, not slamming, not loud, just the soft sound of something closing quietly as if sealing her inside. She called out again, her voice shaking, this time demanding an answer. Demanding sense, but the only response was that hum. Again, deeper. Now, closer. Maybe behind the wall. She moved toward the sound, tracing it with her hands along the plaster until her fingers found a seam, a faint line in the wall almost invisible. She pushed against it and felt it give slightly like a hidden door. Something mechanical clicked, and the wall slid open just enough to reveal a narrow stairway leading down into darkness. Her first instinct was to run to find help, to call someone. Anyone. But her phone was still in her car, and she could not bring herself to turn back now. Not when she had already stepped this far into something that had been waiting for her. She looked down the stairs, the faintest glow of light from below flickered like candlelight, and she felt the pull again. That strange recognition from the photo, from the voice that had spoken her name outside. She descended one step at a time, the wood creaking beneath her, the air colder, heavier, filled with the scent of old stone and dust at the bottom of the stairs. She found a small room lined with shelves, papers, and photographs pinned to the walls, more of her face, more images from her past moments she barely remembered and some she knew had never happened. Pictures from events she had never attended, scenes she had never lived. It was impossible yet. There they were, her name scrawled, again and again across the margins of letters, across fragments of handwriting that was not hers. And then on the far wall something else. A single large photograph of her standing outside this very house tonight, taken from across the street, moments before she had arrived. The shock rooted her to the floor. She felt her breath quicken, her skin prickle as she stepped closer. Staring at the picture, the snowflakes captured mid-fall, the exact tilt of her head, the way she had looked at the door as, if uncertain, she turned in a rush, scanning the corners of the room. The ceiling, the faint glint of something metallic near the vent. A camera lens pointed down at her. Still blinking red recording. Her voice came out hoarse. Barely a whisper, asking who was there, who had done this, but the hum rose louder and then stopped. Suddenly cut off, leaving only silence, heavy and absolute. She backed toward the stairs, ready to climb out, when she heard footsteps again, this time, deliberate, descending from above, slow, measured, calm, like someone who already knew she was waiting below. She could see the faint outline of shoes at the top of the steps, a shadow stretching down the wall, and then a voice, low and familiar, spoke her name again. Not a question, not a greeting, but something closer to recognition, as if she had finally arrived where she was meant to be. And before she could move, the lights flickered once more and went completely dark, leaving only the sound of breathing, not hers, but someone else's, steady, close, and waiting. When the lights went out, the darkness was absolute and thick like fog. Alicia stood frozen, her breath coming in quick, shallow bursts. She could hear the faint creak of the floor above, the slow, measured descent of footsteps that seemed to echo directly inside her chest. Her mind raced between fight and flight, between reason and panic. She could feel her heart pounding loud enough to fill the silence as the shadow at the top of the stairs began to take shape, faintly lit by the dim glow of a single flickering candle, held in a steady hand, the light revealing the face of the man she had seen in the photograph. His eyes fixed on her with a strange calm that made her step back instinctively, though there was nowhere left to go. Ethan Cole, she said, though her voice was only a whisper, the name barely forming on her lips as he reached the bottom of the stairs, his expression unreadable. He nodded slowly, as if acknowledging a truth she had not yet understood. His voice, when it came, was soft, measured, familiar in a way that unsettled her. He told her that the past never truly stays buried, that she had once made a choice that set 100 quiet consequences into motion, that every deal, every decision, carried echoes, and that some of those echoes had finally found their way back to her. He stepped closer, the candlelight catching the curve of his smile, the kind that carried both welcome and warning. She wanted to demand answers, to ask how he knew her, why her picture was on his walls, why there were files about her life, her company, her private moments, but something about his presence stopped her. It was not fear exactly, more a sense that the answers were already waiting, that she had always known where this path would lead. He told her that 2 years ago she had made a choice to save her company by ending his. She remembered the name his startup absorbed and dissolved during the merger that had cemented her as a visionary and left others in ruin. He said he had lost everything that night. Not only his business, but something deeper. Something he had never stopped chasing. He gestured toward the photographs, the clippings, the evidence of years spent watching from a distance. He said he had followed her rise not out of hatred but fascination, because he needed to understand how someone could smile through destruction, how ambition could burn so clean it left no trace of ash. He said he had built something new, something quiet under a different name, that tonight she had come not because of a dare, but because she had been drawn by what she refused to see in herself. She wanted to tell him he was wrong, that this was madness, that she was not the villain in his story. But the words tangled in her throat as he handed her the envelope again, the same one with her name in his handwriting.